All right, this is going to be a fun video. I'm going to correct some wives' tales and some chainsaw lore, rumors, internet speak, whatever. I've seen an awful lot of, oh, you got to reset your auto tune, you got to reset your MTronic. This is the perfect time for me to do this. This 562 just got a brand new carburetor. I installed the firmware on it, and this is set at factory default carb settings. Okay, so it's going to start out pig rich. The 462 I got right here, I'll insert a little clip when I'm done talking. Cracked fuel line, replaced the fuel line. So anyway, this saw is going to be completely out of tune because there was fines in the carburetor screen. It was starving for gas. It would have tried to tune around this problem that went on and on and on until it wouldn't run anymore. Well, it was running so bad, they were like, oh shit, we gotta stop. So let's learn some stuff together. Today on this 462, don't ask me how this happened, but guy said, hey man, it's not running right, yada, yada, yada. I take the fuel cap off and I look down on the tank and the fuel line's just sitting there hanging out with nothing on it. Now the fuel filter was just bouncing around there, and I'm like, huh, how'd that happen? So if you're gonna take one of these off, just take a piece of coat hanger and make you a, genuine steel tool. Whoops, kind of hard to do this looking through the camera. There we go. And gently take it out like this and then peel it off. Don't pull too hard. That's how I assume it got torn. So your next assumption is if there's no fuel filter, we got to pull the carb and take a look. And surprise, surprise, there's a ton of fines in the internal screen. Hopefully the carburetor's okay. Going to give it a quick cleaning and replace the fuel line, and then we'll take it out and start cutting to get it acclimated. All right, so when it comes to this reset stuff, first thing I want to ask is, why do you want to reset your saw? Is there a problem? Or is this like just a huge temperature swing? That needs to be addressed first. Or maybe just all the cool kids are resetting their saws right now, and that's what you want to do. If you have a bona fide issue, take it to the shop and have it looked at. Okay, the 562 is going to be the better show of why, if you just run the saw like it needs to be run, it will tune itself. So what I'm going to demonstrate is nice, smooth, even cuts. If you're in the wood, dogging it in and coming off, it's only tuning that amount of time you're under load. So nice, steady, even cuts. The faster, your saw will tune faster, the steadier you are. All I've done with this is just, when I left the shop, I fired it up, I goosed it a couple of times, revved it, and shut it off just to make sure everything's good. Allow it to idle, so we're working on like a high-end setting while it's under load, nice and smooth. Let it idle for a second, and now it's dialing in its idle setting. because these are long, steady cuts, that time I was leaning on it just a little bit harder, try to make it work for that RPM. Alright, so I was completely in tune now. There's no sense in dragging it across. I mean, I know that was the old way they explained it to us, but if your saw will run well enough, and you can tell if you feel a bunch of heat on your left hand, just stop. You know, you got some kind of problem. The saw should run and operate normally. You know, if it's hesitating, then yes, maybe it's time. If you've been doing some small limbing, you haven't been running it hard under a full load, then, you know, if you have the opportunity on the job site or at the house or the wood pile, go find something where you can do full bar length cuts, make 3 cuts, nice, smooth and steady like this, and it's completely dialed in. All that horse shit about, oh, you got to run 5 or 6 tanks through it before it's tuned in completely, is crap. This cycles at 10 or 15 times per second. The more steady you are, the faster it'll tune itself. If you're in there and you dog and dog and dog and dog, you're on and off the dogs, you're stretching out the amount of time that it would take to get it back into spec. Let's do the 462 next. Again, the only thing I've done with this 462, and because I know it's going to be out of tune with that clogged carburetor, all I did was take it outside, fire it up, goose it a few times, and shut it off. So I know it is going to be somewhat out of tune. Cold start on here. And yes, you can run a recalibration on this, but just stick it in some wood. Sounds a little wonky. See if you can hear the RPMs. It was even picking up RPMs as the bar was in a full-blown cut. Nice and steady. Less than 2 bar length cuts, and it's completely in tune. Don't forget to let it idle a little bit. one of the more common things I see when an auto tuner MTronic saw is out of tune is, again, I mentioned earlier, doing really small cuts. The 201 TCs can get out of tune on like a light pruning job, you know, where it's a half a day of doing nothing but just little penny ante cuts, you know, zip, 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 shut it off, let it hang, move around, zip, 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 zip. And at some point in time, that saw is going to need like a full bar length cut to kind of get back in tune. It's not working at full operating temperature doing those little blip blip cuts. Again, I've had a Husky do the same thing to me. I was doing some wood carving on a stump to fit a mailbox in, and all that partial throttle and piss revving and, you know, nipping and tucking and stuff like that, saw's not being run like a chainsaw. It's been dilly-dallied with. I took it out to the wood pile, stuck it in a log, made 2 or 3 cuts, went back out to what I was doing. So as long as you understand how it works, you'll be better off, and you don't have to run that reset recalibration. If I ran a recalibration test on this right now, it would not run any better at all, because it's dialed in for the temperature, the weather, the fuel, all it's trying to do is find out how many RPMs can I get without going over this heat limit. So, you know, when you start taking fuel away, you're taking lubrication away, and the heat is going to come up. When it gets to a certain point, it's going to add some fuel back to that and bring that temperature down. It can also retard timing just a little bit, but typically it's just done with fuel. And if you have an issue like a cracked fuel line and a clogged carburetor, it's going to try and tune around that. You know, the carburetor can't push the fuel that it's calling for because, well, the carburetor is being starved. So it can get itself out of whack if something is not just so. I know this is a lot to ramble on about, but I definitely wanted to cure some of or at least put some real world, these saws definitely were out of tune when we came out here, and just how simple it is to fix the problem. You know, don't listen to that nonsense about it takes tanks and tanks. 3 cuts, bar length, steady firm pressure. Now, if I came out here and hit it and dogged it in and hit it and dogged it in and hit it and dogged it in, it would have taken even longer, because you're getting small snapshots of full load. So nice and steady, firm pressure, make it work for it, and you should be fine. If when you do those full length bar cuts, your saw is still acting wrong and it's not improving, stop. It's time to get a service. It can't tune around some problem that's there, whether it's an air leak, clogged carburetor, yada, yada, yada. The electronics are incredibly reliable. You have to remember, both of these saws, aside from a smarter ignition coil and a smarter carburetor that's just pulsing fuel as opposed to turning screws, is really about the only difference in between a non-MTronic saw or a non-auto tune saw. You know, you've got a temperature sensor, a smarter coil, you know, you're only 5 components, 5 pieces of the puzzle to MTronic or auto tune. The rest of the saw is still chainsaw, so you're still subject to air leaks, poor fuel quality, clogged fuel filters, yada, 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 yada. I hope you learned something today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.